We may have a few still trickle in. Great to see everyone today. What we'll do is, and again, hoping some may come along, we'll start with a prayer, and then we're going to have some quiet time and just sort of get ourselves ready for discussion. So let us pray. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I am actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with, and will never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen. That's by Thomas Merton. Thought some of you might recognize that.
He's the mountain guy.
Good morning. So let's take a moment to just prepare ourselves, and I'm hoping some of you do that for your daily prayer time, reflection time, reading. So let's just relax, as we talked about last week and in previous sessions. Just close your eyes and just do a few deep breaths, slowly breathing in, holding for a moment, and then slowly breathing out. Do that about 3 or 4 times, and then just be quiet. You can go to some place in your mind, if you like, that is your favorite place to go, a relaxing, prayerful place. And then I'll call you back into our discussion after about 2 minutes. I'm curious, for those who have never done any kind of meditation, but have started to, is there anyone here that maybe never done that? Okay, tell me. So how does it feel to do that? Is it hard? Is it hard to sit quiet? How does your mind go?
Well, it's just been this first week.
Yeah.
And I find, the first few days, it's weird. Like I'm so easily distracted. I had to turn everything off. I had to send the dog in the other room, and it's weird because I'm not used to just being in a quiet spot. So I'm working at that.
Good. And it does take some time. I mean, as far as meditation, it sometimes takes years for some people. But it's the intentional setting aside some time and starting with even 5 minutes, 8 minutes. For some, that might feel like an eternity. And then when you really get into it, 20 minutes or a half hour, it's like, oh, it's done already. So if you want, part of the difficulty for those who are new into it, not only the mind distractions, it's about, okay, when do I stop and how much time have I gone? Have something maybe like your phone, if you have a phone, you know, they all have alarms on it, you can set an alarm. But don't have it like an alarm clock sound. Have some gentle music sound, and a lot of phones offer that as an option. So when you hear that, maybe in a low volume, then you know your time is up. So it should never be on your mind, oh, is it already 10 minutes? Or that should be the last thing on your mind, it isn't time yet. So set something, some reminder that will be a gentle sort of alarm to say time, your time. What I'd like to do for the first maybe 10 minutes is to talk about last week. So last week was letting go of control, and we had some really good discussions. So I'm wondering, because we meet on Tuesdays, and there's still several days of readings and reflections in each weekly sort of theme, was there anything after last week's session that sort of spoke to you? One of the daily sessions. Like the Wednesday one was not my monkey, not my circus. You know, for example. What did you think of that title? That was page 23.
Didn't quite understand it.
Okay. Well, did anyone else have any thoughts on that? Not my monkey, not my circus. Charlotte?
What that says to me is chaos is there, and I don't like it. And if I begin to feel that I'm allowing chaos to be present in my mind and spirit, then I have to stop and purposefully figure out what's going on. I don't just throw it out.
Okay.
But I look at it and see, okay, what is this? Do I need to do anything with it?
Well,
And
that's
work
right.
through it.
How many people take on something? So if you want to try to describe it, take on something you don't need to. It's not mine to worry about. It's not mine to fuss with. So that's what the kind of that thing. It's not my monkey. It's not my circus, right?
Not my problem.
It's not my problem. Exactly. How much does anyone ever get caught into that? Okay, well, would anyone be willing to share something about that? You all laughed about it, so there must be some good stuff there. Ginny, then Gail.
Okay.
I was confronted with this a long time ago with the boss I had, and I went into him and I was telling him the gossip in the office, you know, because I thought that was my job, is to let him know. And he said, Ginny, that's not your problem, it's theirs. Don't worry about that. And that stuck in my mind forever, because I would take on these things like I had to fix it. I don't have to fix anything. They have to fix it.
And as parents, sometimes we sure take on stuff we don't need to. Gail?
For me, it's my best friend who has 4 children that are dysfunctional adults, and she called and we talked for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's her talking, and the burden of trying to help her when she can't fix her children, and I certainly can't, and I finally had to learn after all these years to say, as they say, not my monkey, not my circus, because I was getting so upset over
Right.
what was happening and unable to help in any particular way.
Right. Okay. On Thursday, thank you, the title was Holding On and Letting Go. And part of it is using the Serenity Prayer, which we had last week, to have the wisdom to see any situation for what it is, rather than what we want it to be. You know, we talked a bit about that last week. Sometimes we want something to be a certain way. That's part of our control, right? We want to have control. But says the key to peace of mind is to let that go, right? So one of the questions it asks on Thursday is, what stresses in your life, stresses, need to be let go at this time in your life? Can you think of a stress or 5 that need to be let go? Can you think of something? So on these daily ones, there are specific questions. And again, we only went to Tuesday because we meet on Tuesday. So was there something from the Thursday session that Sir talked to you, Bobby?
The statement at the beginning, taking as he did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it.
Uh-huh.
I kind of objected to that.
Okay.
Because to me, he lived in the world and he tried to change it by showing the way. And so
Well, I think what he's meaning is Jesus came into this world, as Niebuhr would say, as a sinful world. He came in to love the world. But he also knew he couldn't change every aspect of it. So part of it, I think what he's trying to say, remember this is taken out of context. So not as I would have it. So the world is as a certain way, and we want to, we wish we could change so many things, especially what's happening out in Ukraine right now. Wish we could just sort of stop it like that. The not as I would have it, I think, refers to control. Again, there's certain things beyond our control that doesn't mean we don't try to deal with it and address it. But it's going to grind us down if we think we can change everything or change people. We talked about that last week, about trying to change someone in your life. Some people get married because they think they could change the other person. And we know that's not a successful start, usually to relationships. But I think that's what he's saying. But again, it's taken out of context. So that Jesus came into the world to love the world, to make changes, but knowing that he couldn't do it all. And change is a process. It happens over time. And even within our own lives, it may be a whole lifetime of trying to change. And a lot of it is about letting go of the stresses, letting go of certain concerns. And some, as Ginny was just sharing, they're not our concern. Or we can't control that. We got to let that go, and other people have to take responsibility for other things. Tom?
Yeah, the way I look at that is Jesus was able to see the light and the darkness and hold it together. Mm-hmm. And we might want to just say, well, it should be all light. But if we do that, then our choices and our free will goes.
Did everyone hear what Tom was saying? Does anyone need him to elaborate a little more? There is free will, and the world is filled with light and dark, good and bad. And we are free to make choices, free to act. But sometimes the knowing, experiencing the shade helps us to experience the coolness and the joy, but we can still go into the sun and be baked in June in Arizona. But we know but we have that choice to get out of the sun also. It's not always sunshine and heat. It's not always dark either. So there are choices. Charlie?
I'm glad you're saying that about choices. I remember as children, I have an older brother and a younger brother, and my often saying about my older brother is he makes me this, he makes me that. And nobody can make me do anything. I choose. And that's true as an adult. I make the choices about how I feel or what I'm thinking, or nobody makes me do anything. It's in my brain to make the choice. And I was an addiction therapist for a lot of years, and that was one of the hardest things for people to understand, that we make our own choice. Nobody makes us do anything. We're choosing. And that puts the responsibility back in my brain.
Not if you're in prison.
Yeah, in the example you're giving, especially dealing with if it's addictions or other things, for people to make choices, hopefully good choices, they need to be presented with some options.
Exactly.
Like the sad thing is, some people grow up in circumstances that they don't know anything better. They grow up in maybe a poor area with violence on the streets, gangs roaming, whatever's happening. They don't know the difference. Or someone grows up in a family where, there's 2 or 3 in a bed because they don't have beds. They don't know that. They don't know. Don't all families do that? Things like that actually happen. So at some point, the choices, people make their own choices. So how do we then help them? And if it's addiction or some other issue, how do we then present the other side, other options? It's ultimately their choice. They can still pick up the bottle, pick up the drug, or whatever. But how do we offer the choices? It's more of a question. It's a process.
It is.
It's a process, and they have to almost unlearn some things, don't they? And realize that this choice might harm them, yet this choice might bring them some peace and healing. But we're constantly facing choices in our life, and how do we choose? As Christians, we do ask God into our life. The one thing about having the faith that we have, not only do we not walk journeys alone because there's a community, the church community that walks with us through difficult times and challenges, we can pray in those quiet moments and ask God to help direct us, to give us some sense of wisdom, direction, courage, strength, patience, that maybe those choices will present themselves in a way that shows, I want you to choose life. I don't want you to choose darkness and death. When we bring someone into the church who's never experienced God, a lot of times people, it's almost disorienting for them because they've never experienced perhaps love and support, depending on their circumstances. And then we get a chance to nurture them and just love them and help them to tap into that strength that comes from God. And by doing that, they can then learn to let go of whatever they have to let go, whether it's addiction or other kind of self-inflictions that are harmful, or relationships that are toxic, or whatever. Okay, well, is there anything else from last week before we go on to this week? Well, this week, right on the tail of letting go of control, is letting go of hurt and disappointment. And I said last week when I mentioned the topic for this week, there isn't a person alive that hasn't had hurt and disappointment at some point in their life. Do you think that's too broad a statement? And it can be different things. So I'm just curious. Throw out words, throw out comments. What is a hurt or a disappointment?
Yeah.
Death.
Loved one.
Death of a loved one. That's like way up there. Other things.
Rejection.
Rejection.
Desertion.
Desertion.
Loss,
What's that?
loss. Loss of a pet, loss of a parent.
Yep. Loss. Anything else? What other kind of hurts and disappointments have been experienced by people? What other things?
People moving away.
That's people moving away. So loss can be various things, right? It's not just loss like through death. It can be other kinds of losses. Broken relationships.
Parental control,
Parental control.
and I can give an example.
So, oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
When I graduated high school, I wanted to go to college and be a journalist. And my mother said, no, you're going to go into a healthcare field, because she was in one, and she said, you'll always have a job. And she enrolled me in a hospital program in Utah. I lived here in Arizona. I did that for 20 years. And when Tom and I moved to Kansas, I had the opportunity to finally do what I always wanted to do, and I became a journalist. It took 20 years. And I was very disappointed as a child at graduating high school, because Mama couldn't afford to send me to college.
Okay,
And I did what Mama said.
right.
And I hated the field I was in, and I made a living in it. And I was good at it, but, yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte. Any other kinds of hurt or disappointments that we can name? Just name.
Bullying.
Judy?
Plans that you have that
Plans.
seem to be blocked constantly.
Hmm.
You can't realize them.
Plans. Yes. Well, interesting, because on page 28, I took this quote out of there. As we let go of what we thought we had been called to, our true calling begins to manifest. As we let go. How many people, now it could have been the other way for you, Charlotte. You could have ended up going into the journalism and find out, well, hey, this doesn't pay even my rent. Mama was right. I don't know. So what I want you to do, we're going to look at the first question, and we're going to break into groups again. So please, those who are at singles at the tables, please turn to another table. Can you think of a time when you struggle? So this is a you question. When you struggle to let go of a hurt or disappointment you experienced. When you struggled, you personally, to let go of a hurt or disappointment you experienced. Okay, so we'll take about 10, 12 minutes for that, and then we'll come back and talk. Okay. How was that? Was it hard? Was it hard? Any stories shared? I know I've heard one story I think was very hard to talk about. Life, disappointments, struggles. On page 30, Scott Stoner, for today's reflection, third paragraph down. Life is full of hurt and disappointment. That's the bad news. The good news is that life and new beginnings are always possible once we fully acknowledge and feel our hurt, and then gradually let it go and move beyond it. That is the promise of our faith. It is the ongoing process of death and resurrection that we live our entire lives. Any thoughts about that little comment by Scott Stoner?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. So what he's done here, he's put it into a faith context. You know, life is, and he's acknowledging it, it's full of hurt and disappointments. But that the good news is that new life and new beginnings are always possible. And once we acknowledge and name the hurt, you know that, naming it, because sometimes we don't. We know we're in pain emotionally, mentally, but we haven't verbalized it. We know it. You know, when there's someone I know that only when it was acknowledged that one of the parents was an abuser was the healing able to start. The promise of our faith, the ongoing process of death and resurrection. Death, Charlotte?
I thoroughly trust both these people, so it's easy for me to share with them. And what I was just thinking is, if I didn't have people in my life that I know I can trust with anything that I need to let out, it would be on very shaky ground.
So that's part of this here. What or who has helped you, right? What or who has helped you.
And I don't just willy-nilly make friendships.
Uh-huh. So for you, having people you can trust and confide in and speak to,
And they trust me.
and they trust you.
Yes, that's very important.
Stuart?
Just to, what you said resonates a little bit with me from the work I did, was similar to what you did in the Serenity Prayer and the gradual, like one day at a time type thing. Does this sound familiar to you? It's just AA, well AA, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
Rooted in that, and I mean, just some things come through. You can let go by remembering that hurt. Another one that they do is hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
People who hurt people
Hurt
are
people, if you didn't hear it, hurt people, hurt people.
And if you,
Very true.
you can get to that, it's there's just a little switch in there, you know.
Yep.
This guy is hurting that
Yep.
person, or this person is hurting that
Right.
person.
They hurt so they
It's
want
more,
you hurt.
this person is hurt, so therefore they hurt that person. And
Right.
it's just a little bit easier to bear and a little bit easier to let go of.
Right.
And this all ties in.
And it happens in very simple ways. It's not all, it doesn't have to be something totally entrenched. You ever have a situation where someone has a bad morning in home before they go to work, you know? By the time they get to work, that is dumped onto other people at work.
Oh, yeah.
You know how that happens? The dog gets kicked, the whole thing, all that stuff goes on. I put down this word here, identity. I've known people who have a hard time letting go of their hurts or disappointments because they are grounded in it. Their identity is based on that hurt.
Yes.
Does anyone understand what I mean by that? Anyone want to share anything about that, or someone maybe you've known, or no names, of course?
Well, I'll
Tom?
jump in. Okay, so my father was killed when I was 3, okay?
Okay.
My little sister was 1. It immediately plunged us into what I would call poverty nowadays, I guess. My whole thing is be grateful for what you got and move on. My sister has felt her entire life that hurt cannot be overcome.
Right.
The world is against her because look what they did to us, and there's nothing you could possibly do that would make her happy or content.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting that she can't let go. She's never let go.
So your father died, she was 1.
Yeah.
She wouldn't even really remember him,
No.
but she's allowed that to form her identity for her whole life.
Right, right. Well, and I'll give you an example. Since we were brought up Catholic, the church always, back in the 50s anyway, would like have a family that they would bring food to, and you know, like we were allowed to go to Catholic school without paying for it,
Right.
but we had like hand-me-down outfits.
Yeah.
I was delighted. I mean, it was clothes I hadn't had, and I thought it was just really cool. She resented,
Sure.
how come I get secondhand, da-da-da-da. And once again, it's how do you let go?
Right.
Just move on.
There's
Okay.
a book called Let Go, Let God.
Let go, let God.
And
book.
it's so
Just let go.
powerful. And it's nice if you know someone like that, if you can share it with them, because you don't have to take that on. God
Right.
will take it on for us. That's what he does.
Never.
But people do take it on, right? And
Yeah, she can't look.
how can we as Christians living our faith, following in sort of that path of Jesus, how do we help people to take it off of them and put it on? Let Jesus shoulder it, right? You know, come unto me all who labor, you know, carry heavy burdens. How can we do that? Any thoughts about that? How can we help somebody?
There's such a thing as healing of the memories, and
Yeah.
Charlotte
Healing of
does
the
that
memories,
better than
yeah.
I do. But it's a way of helping people. Of course, they have to want help.
Yeah.
But
That's right, number one.
Yeah.
That's
it's a
one.
great way to transfer their burden to Jesus.
Right.
It is a process, and it's something I was taught how to do, but I also had it done to me, and with the priest, and it was miraculous.
Mhm.
But it takes a lot of
Mhm.
courage, mental courage,
Yeah.
to submit to another person and let them walk you through that.
Yes, courage. It does take courage.
Yeah.
And that courage, again, really can only come through the power of God,
That's right.
you know.
That's exactly.
Well, in the men's group just before this, we were talking about how thinking we can do it all, that we're you know, that we have the ability, we can't. We do need to depend on God. We do need God's strength in our life and the Spirit to work in our life. We may not always be able to understand that. We don't have to understand it. We just have to try our best to let God sort of take it away and just begin that process of healing in our lives. And it's the what and who. I think some of these issues here, I mean, you can go to therapy. So let's say the secular world stuff. You could go to therapy. But I have to look at it from a spiritual side. Go to therapy and seek God's solace, healing. You know, I think it's both. I think it's both. And I encourage anyone who has serious issues and needs to seek a counselor, for sure, therapist, but also allow God to heal within. Because the heart that is wounded, the mind that is wounded, therapy could do so much, but God is the true healer. I once took some people through a process where at the end, and you've probably, well, some of you may have done it too, they wrote down over 2 days some of the heavy hurts and disappointments and pains. Some were like awful stuff. We didn't see them. They wrote it. And then at the end of the 2 days, with prayer and song, we burned them, what they wrote. And for some, it was the first time they ever put in word that what their pains were. And it was a beginning. It wasn't the solving of everything, but it was a beginning of a process for some of these people that went on to seek help, professional help. But they also then knew that God not only was there through some of those terrible times, but God continues to be there through those times. Gail, you were sharing something on a positive side. And would you be able to share some of that? Because I think that when we talk about the what or who, also how, I think could be added to that. Can you share some of something?
Well, first off, I have a very strong faith, and I was diagnosed with cancer in 2000, and it was extremely virulent, and when I clicked on it on the computer, it said usually dead within the first year. And I clicked the computer off and said, okay, God, and never looked back. Well, of course, you know what happens. You go through all kinds of chemical changes, and I got the dry heaves. And at first I was getting up and racing to the bathroom, and then finally it dawned on me, it was the dry heaves. And I could lie there in my bed and be reasonably comfortable. And then I thought about it a little bit more and asked God, and I thought, I'm strengthening my abdominal muscles without doing a dang thing. Hallelujah.
There you go.
So it was trying to make lemonade out of lemons, and I've always had, drives my children crazy, but I've always had trying to change what was negative to find something positive out of the negativity. And I've had so many medical situations where I could have died. I've had stroke, I've had 3 heart attacks, and everybody says, how do you live through it? And I said, I'm too ornery. The devil doesn't want me, and God has a purpose for me. I just haven't discovered what it is yet. So
Thank you.
I'm still here.
Good.
22 years.
Yes,
She
22 years.
just said something that I've learned is so powerful, is how small is your God?
How small is it?
How small is your God? And, or is your God too small? You know, what do I project on God that does not allow me to have faith that this God is so big and created me for a purpose?
Right.
How much do I really believe in this faith that
Right.
I have?
So how much do we, in a negative sense, project onto God
Yeah.
and say God can't help me? God is not able to do. Versus the other side is how big and awesome is God and what can God do? Right? And calls us to a deeper faith.
I have to share something.
Ginny?
About 3 weeks ago, I had a dilemma, and it was bothering me for like 3 days. How is this going to resolve itself? So I called my mentor who taught me how to meditate. She lives in Bellevue. And I said, Jane, I don't know how to deal with this. Pray for me that God will listen. And then I did my meditating, and last week, I don't even remember what the dilemma was. It's not dementia. I just really don't remember. That's how great he is.
Amazing. It's amazing. We have, over the next, let's say, 5 minutes, we'll start rounding off. Would anyone like to share anything that came out of one of your discussions that can help someone else? So I asked Gail to share what I heard when I was going around, because that whole positive side. I love that. Dry heaves are helping to get your muscles stronger. But so we all know we're there, okay, at some point. Maybe right now you're in the middle of something. But what helped you? Or who helped you? Because that's what's really important. A positive outlook helps. Knowing God is bigger than what we make God is another way, as Charlotte said. Let's focus on this for a second. So what has helped you? For all of you who have been through something, or know someone who has, who or what has helped? Yeah?
Well, this letting go is what's helping me right now, I've got 3 trips, 3 flights. Chicago, Boston, and Wisconsin coming up. And I get anxious, and I'm letting go. This is helping me, letting go. It's amazing what you can find in books or, you know, in readings.
So it's the right time for you.
Yes,
Timing's good for you.
Yes,
Letting go.
perfect. Because I don't like to let go.
Yeah.
I say scripture,
Scripture.
because when I went through a lot of her, during my divorce, a friend helped me, gave me some scriptures to get me started, but just kept reciting the scriptures over and over again, that God is always with me, never to leave me.
So for you, the scripture would give you that comfort and.
Yeah, God is my help in time of trouble, and just over and over again, I just read those, and it gave me strength, knowing that there was someone there, even though I couldn't see that person, I knew he was there.
Right.
So I think that helps a lot, knowing your Bible.
Thank you. Christy, Diane, and Bobby.
Well, when Charlotte was talking about how good it is to have somebody to, relate to, and hear you out and so on. And my husband really was my best friend. And we were married for 55 years and just had, every marriage has its ups and downs, but we had a very good relationship, and he's the one I could, vent or whatever you say. He was willing to listen, caring, loving. And so and I kept thinking when he dies, and he had a bad heart for a long time, and I knew it was going to happen. And I thought when he dies, I'll just fall apart. I'm just going to fall apart. But I didn't. And I think it's because of my faith. And I had, there's a line from the Beatles that says, I get along pretty well with the help of my friends.
Right.
That I can identify with that. I think God worked through friends and made me, helped me and just, and
So
my
friends,
have.
your husband,
And I
and
know
God.
God has been there, and, it's just step by step, I think, all the stuff that he did and everything too, besides that, how will I ever, but God was there, one
Yeah.
by one.
Amen to that.
Yeah. And you know what, I think giving ourselves patience also, permission to be patient, because if you have a whole lifetime of stuff, don't expect it to be solved like in a week. And to give yourself permission to take the time, to seek the help, to start working through that process. And again, it might take years, depending on the situation. But thank you. So friends, your husband.
I just want to add one more thing. So after Paul died and I moved here permanently, and I needed a church because the one I was going to was too far away and I don't drive. So I started coming to St. Francis. And St. Francis was very, very helpful to me. The people were so nice and kind and still are.
Right.
I feel like there's a sense of family.
And I'll put a plug for the Stephen Ministry too.
And
A little advertising. Stephen Ministry, there are fantastic people who are there for you. Again, when I said, if you need to go to a therapist for something or a counselor, to balance it with the spiritual side too, and Stephen Ministry is one way to do that. And St. Francis, of course, is the Stephen Ministry Church. Okay?
And this is short, but with reference to what we were discussing, what I have tried to do in my life once I've reached some maturity, and I thank God for allowing me to live till I'm 50, which I am, and I try to be the heart and hands wherever I go, and that's healing for me.
So, being the heart and hands, Diane tries to be the heart and hands of Jesus wherever she goes, and that's healing for her, right? That's part of your process. So, and isn't that what Jesus also talks about?
Yeah.
To get off ourselves, our focus, Doesn't mean we don't take care of ourselves, but look beyond us and where can we make a difference in the world? How can we help?
Love one another.
Love one another. And when you do that, yes, it can also bring healing to yourself too.
Absolutely.
So, Bobby.
Well, I think of all the things that I have to be grateful for, and it so far outweighs any problem that I have.
So looking at all those wonderful blessings, and it helps to go beyond some of those other hurts or whatever's. I realize. Yeah. Sharon?
When I had my hurt and I had to go through that, I already had Jesus in me. I carried him every day. He was there, and he was my therapist. He helped me go through what I had to go through. And I always look around and I always think how fortunate and blessed I was, because how do people deal with things if they don't know Jesus? I don't
Yeah.
know. I really feel so
Yep.
sorry for them.
Yeah. So for those who maybe couldn't hear Sharon, what she went through, she already had Jesus in her life and how that was so important to help her. But she also made a comment, she wonders how other people who are dealing with issues who don't have Jesus, how do they work through it?
Warren, there's a thing in church that Tom and I object to, and it's when we say Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. Anybody sitting next to us in church will hear us say Christ is within us at the end.
Yeah, that's, the present is missing.
Yeah, but this, no, he's not gonna come again, he's already here.
Yeah.
And I want that changed. I don't like this little, there, I'm done.
You said it. Okay. One other thing I'd like to add to this, in addition to something such as the Stephen ministry, a trained and certified spiritual director is also good to help you with your daily life, your movement, your decisions, moving forward, whatever it is. So that's just another plug. We're already there at the time. One last thing I want, and maybe we don't really have time to do this, but something to think about, and it's one of the questions that was asked. Is there a place you go to heal and to reconnect with your desires and God's desires for you? Is there a place you go? And I put the place in quotes because place isn't, it could be an actual place. You know, I went to the mountains in Arizona 34 years ago to determine whether I wanted to be or I should continue the path to be a priest. I went to an actual place. We all have places that maybe are special for you, that help you to heal. It might be by the ocean, or by walking through a beautiful foresty area, maybe, or some sort of wilderness spot, or whatever it is. But the other thing is place. Place may also maybe within. So I put place as a not always physical place. Where do you go to connect with God? And again, meditation as another example. Sometimes we go within to meet God and to speak and to listen. But anyway, it's just a question. So something to ponder over the next few days. Is there a place you go to heal and to reconnect with your desires and God's desires for you? What does God desire of you? We all know what we want in life, or wanted in life, and some way I'm so glad that things I wanted didn't happen. No, really, yeah. Maybe where do you go to seek, to learn, and discover God's desires for you? So that would be one part of the question. The other one would be, what is God desiring of you? What is God seeking for you within your own life. That just something to think about. Okay. Let's close off with our prayer. And this one is from St. Augustine. My hope is in you, O thou full of compassion. I commit and commend myself unto thee, in whom I am, and live, and know. Be thou the goal of my pilgrimage, and my rest along the way. Amen.
Amen.
So continue to go through the next few days. Several days still for week 2. We'll talk next week. And the third week, next week's theme is letting go to enhance our health and well-being. Enhance our health and well-being.
Hey, Warren.